Okay, we're going to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members, Cost, Bub, Marmee. Hall is sitting in for Blake, and Labutus is sitting in for Frazier. They actually, I know one of them is in traffic due to an accident. So first item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $8,800.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had an employee leave us, and this is part of the payout.
Okay.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Bub, second by Cost. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Mr. Blake is now in, so he will sit in for himself now. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $46,500.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have another retirement here.
Motion.
Second. Motion and a second. Any questions or discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $4,200.
This is a termination payout for a resignation.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Bob, second by Labutus. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $7,539.68.
This is for the sale of 2 staff vehicles and a snow plow on Gov Deals.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Bob, second by Labutus. Questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, this Finance Committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up is Service.
I bring the Service Committee meeting to order. Members present are Cost, Bob, Blake, Labutus, Hall, Cost, Labutus filling in for.
Hey, Doug, can you sit in for Lang?
Yeah, sure.
It's Marmee, Labutus.
Marmee.
Like yourself.
You can. Yeah, sure.
Consider resolution number 18-19, authorizing the conveyance of certain real property now owned by the city of Newark, Ohio, to Newark Development Partners as its agent for industrial, commercial, distribution, and research development. Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Years ago, we had a discussion with actually Councilman Marmee about pieces of property that the city no longer has a need for. This piece of property on the corner of Popular and South 5th has been identified as a piece of property that we no longer have a need for. I've been in contact with Stanley Ford, the property owner that attaches to. Stan has expressed an interest in that property. I don't have a final negotiation with him, but I wanted to see if it was all right to transfer this to the Newark Development Partners, and then at that point we would transfer it to Mr. Ford, and any proceeds from the sale of that would come back to the city.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second by Brutus. Are there any questions? Committee?
Director Rhodes, Mr. Chairman. What's the benefit of going through?
It's a great question. It's a great question. When I first got appointed service director, there was a piece of property up on the corner of Dio and Mount Vernon Road, a little triangle piece that connected to the car wash piece. And we had to have that completely surveyed. A lot of title work, a lot of attorney work, cost the city about $6,000 to put it together, to get it ready for sale, and then you put it out for public bid. And I think we received like $3,400 or $4,000 from the people that own the car wash. So it's a savings to the taxpayers by doing it this way. Because the Newark Development Partners just take it in, they charge a small processing fee, and it's pre-negotiated prior to them even receiving it. So what happens is we go to a closing table, we transfer it to Newark Development Partners, they transfer it to Stanley Ford in this case. Yep. So it's a savings to the city. It's a good question.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions out of the audience? All those in favor of sending this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. It passes
5-0.
5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. That concludes service. Capital improvements is next.
Thank you, everyone, for waiting. I'd like to call this meeting of the Capital Improvements Committee meeting to order. Those present are Hall, Rath, Labutus, myself, and Fennell. On the agenda tonight, first up, we've got a resolution 18-18, appropriation in the amount of $15,000. Mr. Baum, or Director Baum, you're here to speak about this one?
Yes. $15,000 for law enforcement supplies to affect traffic enforcement later this spring.
That'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Labutus, second by Hall. Any discussion from anyone on the committee? Go ahead, Mr. Rath.
I was just curious, why do we not have monies in the budget in our safety?
No, it was an unanticipated expense, plus with the cost, they by definition meet the amount for capital improvement for their expected life and the cost of the item.
Okay.
Anyone else on the committee? I guess I'll ask a question, Mr. Director Baum. Are there other options, less expensive than what we're doing here?
I suppose there could be, but what I'll say is the chief and his team did the research. This is the item they felt was most appropriate with the software, the support that goes along with it for the electronic record. Make no mistake, an actual parking measurement device is the cheapest part of this. It's the electronic software that will keep the records for however many years that's deemed by the law director's office to be the appropriate amount is the true cost of this.
Gotcha. And do you happen to do we get the money from the parking enforcement? Do we get that money back to the city?
So probably not all of it, probably a small portion, just like I think $1 or $2 from a traffic citation actually goes to the city. The rest of it is mandated by the state where it goes, so that there's not an incentive to writing citations to people.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or a financial incentive, I should say.
Have we looked at the numbers in terms of how many, or estimated how many tickets we might write to know, is there a point at which these might pay for themselves?
No, only because I don't know what that percentage of the citation would be. And I will say that a parking magistrate can fine you the entire $20 or a portion of that amount. So it's never been a solid number. It's always a moving target depending on what your story is and the magistrate's decision.
Understood. And so what's the life expectancy of the devices?
I would say at least a half a dozen years, but I couldn't give you a number. It'll depend on inclement weather, how often they're used, But like any electronic device, usually we try and get 6 years out of a taser. This is pretty much the same thing.
Sure. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience?
What is
Sorry, could you state your name and address for the record?
Janet Green, 1791 Olympic College. Newark. I just want, what is it that you're
Podium.
buying?
Oh, sorry, I should have asked you. You come up to the podium, please, so we get on the record. I'm sorry. We can't hear you otherwise for the record.
Sure. Janet Green, 1791 Olympic Court, Newark. I just wanted to know what this is that the money's getting spent for. Is this the, he didn't say, he just said he needed $15,000, so I'd like to know what it is.
Director Baum, if you want to elaborate.
My apologies, we've had ongoing discussions about this. In accordance with the new legislation for parking downtown, we are purchasing, call them a parking gun, a device that will measure the location of a parked vehicle whose record will be held electronically in said device, so that either 2 hours later or however long later, any vehicle still in a 2-hour zone, there will be an electronic record that the vehicle is in violation. A parking ticket can be electronically issued, and electronic record kept for the law director's office to then use at any subsequent proceeding that is requested by the violator after they are given a citation.
Thank you. Did that clear up your question, Mrs. Green? Yeah. Ms. Hall?
Yeah, I believe, just to take it a little step further for explanation, I think before we had talked, excuse me, the question was if you move your car, it still can be tracked.
These devices will track you anywhere within one of the 2-hour zones. Honestly, in an 11-hour zone is a moot point for us. We're not going to be enforcing traffic for 11 hours a day. So in these 2-hour zones, if you were in violation anywhere else in a 2-hour zone, there will be an electronic record of it. You can't just write a paper parking ticket anymore and throw it in a file. That doesn't work. We've moved past that. The law director's office doesn't want to entertain it. Apparently magistrates are not interested in it. They want an electronic record for a multitude of reasons. So now you must buy a system that will incorporate with Marcia Phelps's clerk's office as well. We just couldn't buy just anything. It has to interface with CMI, which is the IT company that works with the clerk of court's office.
Okay. Mr. Cox?
Yeah. How large of an undertaking is that going to be to interface with the clerk of court's office? Is that going to be a long, involved procedure?
I don't believe so, because I believe that was part of the selection process, is that the city's general IT contractor, AlphaLink, is in communications with the software company that works with the clerk's office, and they don't seem to think that there's any problem. I don't know that it will be as easy as plug and play. It rarely is. But they wouldn't have proposed this system if AlphaLink, who I trust implicitly, hadn't said, we can do this. It's not a problem.
Sure.
How soon would you envision?
I would like to be issuing parking citations by May, but I won't give you, that's just what I would like to do. I can't give you a firm date at this point, because it may take 6 months just to get the software. I have no idea. So,
Mr. Blake?
Mr. Chairman, Director Baum, just remind me, just because I forget things. When the creation of the downtown improvement district was adopted,
okay. The special improvement district.
Special improvement district.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the term. When that was created, those dollars are going to pay for the officer, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so, what other, besides this equipment, do we have any other obligations to that agreement, or was that a part of that, or because this is coming out of our dollars, not the special improvement, right?
You are correct. I'm unaware of any other obligation to the special improvement district. Other than on a case-by-case basis, if they're going to put on an event and want to hire security from the Newark Police Department, we will certainly entertain what the event is. We won't work for just any event. What I will also say is that traffic enforcement isn't just for the Special Improvement District. It can be used anywhere in the city of Newark. Handicap spaces, fire lanes, anything like that. So the money is coming out of capital improvements because it's City of Newark property. I don't want the Special Improvement District buying it because I don't want the Special Improvement District owning software that's interfaced with the clerk of court's office. I want that to belong to the City of Newark. So we have to buy it. They're going to pay for the officer, but we don't just use it in the downtown area.
Thank you.
Sure.
And so just to clarify, so you mentioned handicap spots. Are there other 2-hour spot enforcement zones outside of downtown, or are we really just talking about other kinds of parking violations?
We're talking about other kinds of parking violations.
And these devices could be used to
Yes.
track that as
They
well?
could be used for parking anywhere.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Any other questions from the committee or the audience?
Is there any other use cases indicative of these devices outside of downtown?
Parking?
Yeah.
Well, don't say downtown parking, but if you say parking, I'll say no.
Okay.
If you say downtown parking, I'll say yes.
Okay.
Like we just talked about, grocery store, fire lanes, handicap spaces anywhere.
And then do we have limitation with that where you have to have the physical device, or can we use the laptops of the cruisers to access this?
Well, I think you're going to have to use the physical device for the electronic record to satisfy both the magistrate and the law director's office.
So potentially we'd have one of them that's being used, I guess, help me understand the deployment. So one to be used generally by the officer in downtown, and then
one to be kept in a patrol supervisor's vehicle
so they can
for
come by
use
and make
anywhere
calls.
else, or downtown if the Special Improvement District hasn't engaged an officer on a Tuesday afternoon and there's a problem on a Tuesday afternoon, the supervisor can either delegate it to somebody or can take care of it themselves.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because we won't charge the Special Improvement District to enforce parking downtown. Any time the parking's enforced, it will only be when we're contracted to. We will still be obligated to enforce parking downtown on a daily basis. Complaint driven,
Sure.
of course, typically, but I don't want you to think that you got to pay us for us to improve it, to enforce it downtown. That wouldn't be fair.
Okay. Any further discussion from the committee, the audience?
I guess I have
Mr. Rapp, yes?
one question. Happened to be down by Scorpios this weekend. I noticed a 30-minute parking sign. Is that?
We have 30-minute parking signs
Okay.
for loading and unloading, typically.
Okay.
And so that would fall into that bucket of outside of the 2-hour zone is the other kind of, gotcha. Okay. Any other discussion? All right, with that, we'll put this to a vote to send this on to full council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes 5-0. And that concludes the business of the Capital Improvements Committee. Thank you.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call this Safety Committee meeting to order. Present are members, Mr. Fennell, Mr. Frazier, Mr. Blake, Mr. Rath, and myself. This evening we have a presentation from Fire Chief on some report from the fire department from the past year. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours. We will have a Q&A portion after this to discuss what he has shared with us this evening. So we'll bring it back together.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
I know periodically you'll see me here when we talk about some statistics in the City of Newark Fire Department, what's going on, and just to kind of keep you up to speed. Be advised, this is very brief, 7-slide PowerPoint that I'll just cover some very basic, important information. More information can be found on our website. We have posted our year-end report there for more comprehensive information down to every run we make and those types of things, some of our plans moving forward. That might be able to assist you. It takes a few minutes. It's a 30-page document, but it's something you could get through in a few minutes and get the information you need out of. So tonight we're just going to basically cover some of the information and let you know where we're at. In 2017, we had some emergency response data that we pulled, and it should be noted that The information from last year was a little bit more, looks a little different than it does this year because we've updated our records management system this year and moved to more detailed way of pulling data. So last year we did 11,223 calls for service. And just to put that in perspective for you, I was hired in 1993 and we were taking about 4,500 calls a year at that time. So we are moving quickly north in runs every single year. If fire calls for service are 1,533, and that includes some assists up, which are people that fall out of their chair or need help out of the bathtub, those types of things. And then the total EMS calls were 9,690. Obviously, it's about a 90-10 type of 85-15, 90-10 type of ratio, EMS heavy. So I think that's pretty common for everybody that does combination fire and EMS responses. But to break that down just a little bit more and explain to you, and we're talking about vehicle maintenance and a lot of things in our report and what it costs to maintain the vehicles and how we use them. 17,359 times we had a vehicle start and go on a run. So some of those runs require multiple units. That's why that happens. So sometimes we have a cardiac arrest, we'll take 2 units, or a fire run may takes all of our units. So each time a vehicle starts and shuts down, obviously a maintenance issue, it costs money towards their replacement or repair. Currently, here's our fire station locations in the city. Station 1 obviously is downtown, Station 3 at Cherry Valley Road, Station 2 on Hollander Street, and Station 4 out of Dayton and East Main Street. And Station 4 has been functioning as a fire prevention and arson administrative building. Many times during the day, if you drive by, you'll see a vehicle parked in the parking lot. That means someone's there. They do have the capability and EMS equipment, AED, and some medical equipment if somebody were to stop there and need some help. But that's been working out fairly well for us in the east end of Newark. Thought it was interesting to note the average response times in Newark and what kind of service are we shooting for. Obviously, there's a national standard of response. When you pick up the phone and call 911, how long do you have to wait for someone to show up? With our resources the way they are in Newark, sometimes the response times can be higher because a unit in that district may be tied up on another run. A medic may be at the hospital, and so on. So a lot of times you'll see our medics coming from all over the city, different places, covering things. But just this is the average response time. So we have some higher and some lowers. These are metrically pulled the metrics off the times. These are the mean response times in those districts. In the east end of Newark, obviously, with freeway times 4 minutes 47 seconds, we're shooting for 4 minutes to have somebody some help. Realistically, and that doesn't always happen. That's big inner city fire departments with a fire station on every corner can sometimes meet those needs. We struggle to get there sometimes. But I thought it's interesting to note that our highest response area is in the Sharon Valley Road, Londondale Parkway. A few years ago, we had a fire on Stratford Woods off Londondale Parkway, and our response time with everybody in quarters was 11 minutes to that home. So that's kind of gives you an idea of an outlier, but there are some, call volumes in different areas. Obviously, they're going to give you more numbers to look at. So I thought it's an interesting little slide for you. If anybody would like this PowerPoint, I think I could easily send it to you by email if it hasn't been sent out. Did Autumn send that out to anybody? No. More than happy to send that out to you so you can take a better look at what we're looking at here. And to note, we have 14 fire zones in Newark, so when we respond on calls, we're looking at what trucks respond in each area of the city. So we have to break it into zones depending on how fast you can get there. And a lot of the ways we figure out how to send what trucks and how fast they can get there is Google Maps and those things like that, and factor in drive times. Your phone will do that for you right now. Well, we do similar to that as far as who's closest from what fire station to get to that zone. And of course the freeway has 2 different zones and those types of things. So it's you would think that, hey, who goes on those calls? That's all spelled out in our computer automated dispatching. We predetermine who's going on runs. When the phone rings from your home address, it automatically pops up at the 911 center what trucks they need to send, what stations, and if they're not available, the closest backups all the way down. 4, 5, 6, 8 trucks deep in some cases, in case all of us are tied up. Even mutual aid companies coming in, it's spelled out. So there'll always be somebody on the road heading your way if you need help.
Can I ask a question later that slide up? can we go, when you're saying there's 14, what did you refer to, districts, you said?
Yes, zones.
Zones, okay. So are they color-coded there? Is that what each zone, because I only count 13 response times numbers, but is there?
On the freeway, we have 2 different zones there. I believe we have 14 zones now.
Okay.
And I think 2 of those, and we created freeway zones recently. So if it's 13 or 14, I'd have to look and see exactly what it is. I might not have put one on here for the West End, State Route 16 West.
Okay.
But that is, yeah, we're right in that area. I can send you more detailed information on that if you wish.
Thank you.
But it's really interesting dynamic when a formula that we use, Chief David Decker is our operations chief, and he manages the zones, and when we have new housing complexes go in, and we move them around to get the best service we can to them. So a lot of times we're figuring, we know what's going to respond down in Newark, but in some cases we call mutual aid companies in to assist us, and we have to know who's closest and who can get there. And we base that on whether they're volunteer sometimes and paid, part paid. Those types of things all factor into a formula that provides the run district and who responds in that area.
Chief, does this include mutual aid?
No.
Response to this, just solely Newark?
This is Newark, yes. So we talk about the fire statistics and district comparisons. The numbers are a little bit different. Obviously, the percentages are fairly the same. But since our new records management software, we're able to, in 2017, those are more accurate numbers. As, we know the percentages of calls in those districts, but it just kind of shows you, downtown station is 46% of the calls in downtown district down here. So a lot of times that paramedic unit or that fire truck from the downtown station is tied up on runs, and we have second calls in that area, which bring the station from Hollander Street or West Main Street down to cover them in some cases. And note that all of our fire apparatus, and I know I've answered this question I don't know how many times, but it's also on our website. Why do you have a fire truck responding on a chest pains call? They generally don't unless that medic in that district is tied up and is at the hospital. They'll go ahead of a medic from another district coming in to be able to start care. And all of our fire apparatus carry the same things the medics do. They just can't transport all the cardiac medications, the cardiac defibrillators, and a paramedic in order to initiate care prior to a medic unit coming from another district. So we're real big on getting started on care as quickly as possible. So obviously District 1's the busiest with 46% of the calls, and then Station 2 on Hollander Street at 26% and on down. District 4, we reduced a little bit. We're down to 5.9% in that district. Why? I can't answer that question. This is such a dynamic job that some things we have happen, we really can't justify by any type of metric. It's hard to chase down why this year it was a little bit slower in that district than last year. But all in all, overall, our districts are about the same. I mean, as last year, just busier in each district, except the East End. EMS statistics, obviously very similar to what we're looking at within a few percentage points. But we're over 4,300 calls out of the downtown station, District 1. That's a lot of calls. When you're 11,200 calls, that's quite a few calls coming out of that firehouse. So the percentages are kind of like 16s as well, just a little more detailed this time. And District 4 dropped by a percentage point as well. That's the only one that dropped. Busiest day of the week is Thursday. We measure those things. We also measure on our year-end report that you could look in there as busiest time of day for each day. So when are we busiest? And that's sometimes you think about peak time staffing, and that's some of the things that we always look into other ways of doing things. We measure all of that. So that's good information as far as moving forward in an operational sense. And of course, just some facts about the fire department. We had an increase of 804 runs, or 9% increase in runs this past year. We did decrease in building fires to 7%. We did have 15 intentional fires, 49 unintentional fires, and 5 undetermined. And the undetermined fires, and a lot of people don't understand, we have a fire and we label it undetermined on our state reporting system. It's because in many cases there's nothing left to investigate. And we really can't beyond a reasonable doubt determine what caused that fire, and that a lot of fires are undetermined. Insurance companies come in and work with our investigators to try to hammer down exactly what it is, and they a lot of times will determine whether it's undetermined as well. And that may be whether they pay your insurance premiums or not, or pay your insurance payments. But 20 fires reported no smoke detectors, which is obviously a big concern of mine. I've pushed heavily publicly to try to get people to get smoke detectors in their homes. We continue to work with the Red Cross. State Farm's been great. State Farm donated 20 or 30 smoke detectors to us again this year. But we do have people stop in regularly asking for smoke detectors, and we do provide them to them. We'll put them in for you. We'll put them in their proper places. We're a full-service fire department as far as smoke detectors are concerned. But when I see 20 fires reported with no smoke detectors, how many homes do we have in our community that don't have any smoke detectors, that just haven't had a fire yet? So that's something that's very concerning to me as the fire chief. So it's something we work on very hard every day. We had 1 fire fatality last year and 5 civilian injuries as a result of fires in our community. And just to be interested in a lot of people, out of the 9,000 EMS calls, we've transported 5,717. That's about 59% of the call volume that we actually ran on, that we actually transported to the hospital. So in some cases, we don't always transport. We help somebody. There's a lot of different things that we go on and we're requested to do. So that's basically it. I think that the information, if you're really interested in more information about us, the end of year report is, I have all the last 3 or 4 years on our website, and it's pretty comprehensive. We'd be more than happy to take phone calls or whatever, and we can talk about it.
Thank you, Chief Connor. I know a few council members asked some questions during that presentation. I spoke with Chief Connor earlier, and he will entertain any questions regarding the information that he just presented. If you have any additional questions for him, he will address those personally after the meeting. But are there any questions over the presentation from the council? Mr. Frazier.
For the deaths that were, the 1 death, the 5 fatalities, was there a smoke detector in the house for those, or do you recall it?
Our fatality fire did not have a smoke detector present. The 5 injuries, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at the data.
Fatality definitely did.
It did not have a smoke detector present at the time, no.
Okay. Ms. Hall?
And I have two questions. When a call comes into 911 for a fire or emergency, it's 911 determines who's available from where?
It's all predetermined. So when you dial 911, a dispatcher looks at a screen and your address comes up, and that address, per the computer, is designated to a zone specifically that we tell them in their software. So we communicate in these areas of town. If it's 123 Main Street, we've already got it predetermined for that home address that it's Medic 1, Rescue 1, Battalion 1, Ladder 1. And then the second stage will be Medic 2 or Ladder 2. So they can go through and check and see who's supposed to be there. Depending on the call, chest pains, trouble breathing, or if it's a fire call, a gas leak or something like that, it gets a lot bigger response. So we'll pull different companies in from across the city. But it's all predetermined on what we call run cards that we have in those zones that we just talked about. So 13 different zones, we have 13 different run cards for the city in that area. So a zone will be attached to you. So we'd be in zone, hypothetically, 1 right here. So that's all predetermined. When you call 911 center, they know who you are. They know it's 123 Main Street. They'll still ask you your name and phone number, even though they see it on the screen. At least they see the homeowner's name. It might not be the occupant, but the homeowner's name. And that's all a predetermined thing that we work with the 911 center.
So that information is constant all day?
All day.
Updated all day?
It's always in there.
Who's where, when?
If we have a new business come into town, we have to add that information into the CAD.
Okay.
We do that constantly. We're constantly emailing back and forth with the 911 supervisors about different addresses and what we want. We'd like to add a unit there, or may call a specific unit to a specific address, and it comes up as a note when they dispatch that address to do that. So the technology's there. If we don't say anything at all, they know what to do. So that it's got to be fail-safe as far as that's concerned. If we have a mass casualty incident, heaven forbid, they know which medics to call in and from where and in what order, how close they are and available. So we've already predetermined that.
Thank you.
Yep.
One last question. Smoke detectors, can they pick those up at Station 4?
They can come down to Station 1 or Station 4.
Okay.
We do keep most of them at the prevention office at Station 4. However, someone stops down to Station 1, and our staff downtown will also take the information and immediately, we address that immediately. We don't sit on those things. That smoke detector is very important. I'll drive them up personally to myself to make sure somebody's protected. So that's, I think, Rod Cook and the Red Cross, and we're going to get together here very shortly again and have another push to put some smoke detectors in our community. So that's something we do a couple times a year at least. But word of mouth gets out pretty quickly. And we do have people randomly stopping in from other communities outside of Newark, stop in all the time. From Hanover, I need a smoke detector. You know, those types of things. So we end up communicating with their fire chief in that area. But there's a lot of people out there that don't have them.
Mr. Rath?
Chief, it'd be nice if we could see what our volume looks like compared to other cities in Ohio that are the same size. Obviously, we don't compare to Heath or Zanesville or something like that, but other cities the same size as Newark, as well as other cities throughout the U.S. that are the same size as Newark.
Well, Mr. Rath, I can tell you I'm very active in Ohio Fire Chiefs and Central Ohio Fire Chiefs organizations. We talk about this stuff regularly. It's public information. Newark is busier than all of them. Anybody our size. We are significantly busier. In Licking County, West Licking is probably the closest fire department to Newark, and they're doing about 5,500 calls a year compared to our 11,200, and that they cover 110 square miles in Pataskala and those types of things. Worthington, Westerville, Upper Arlington, Grandview Heights, all of them, they don't turn the run volume that we do here.
How does that compare in population, though?
I don't know what West Licking's, the population isn't 50,000, I don't believe, but okay. up Pataskala. It's not even close. But of course, it's booming. It's a booming part of they may catch us someday, but right now we are the busiest fire department in this region. We have been for years, and Newark's always been known for being a very busy emergency services, and we continue to be. It just every year goes, even though our borders aren't expanding as fast as some others, we're still getting busier in our emergency services, so it's concerning.
Do you have any reason to attribute the increased runs?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons. I think that just the opioid epidemic and some of those things that add runs to what's going on. And I think the public just looks out and requests us more. Hopefully it's because we do a nice job. And then they do call us. And so, no, you can't really put your finger on why the call volume continues to go up, but it does. So there's an older generation that's living longer now. People are living longer, so the geriatric population needs our services a lot more than in years past, where people are living a lot longer nowadays. And that's part of the reason why there's an influx of runs.
Mr. Frazier?
First off, great job for being the busiest fire department
Thank you.
in the area. Great job. So when it comes to smoke detectors, what is the rule? Is it one on every floor? Is it by square footage? How many smoke detectors should people have in the house? Is it just
you can never have too many smoke detectors, obviously, but one per floor is generally what is recommended. There's certain places to put a smoke detector that you don't want to put a smoke detector in your kitchen. You put it just outside the kitchen and in the sleeping area. So a hallway outside, a bedroom hallway is a good place to have somebody in a common area. So there's certain places, even a carbon monoxide detector, for instance, which is really big. People are using those nowadays in a sleeping area because you're not going to notice when you're feeling ill while you're sleeping. So, monoxide detectors should be in a sleeping area, and smoke detectors obviously in common areas, in sleeping areas, but not in your kitchen. A lot of people put them there, which is, burnt bacon sets it off every time. So. But yes, there are, and that's something we can assist with. If somebody would call and say, hey, can you tell me where to put my smoke detector? We'll send a company down to help them. Did it hopefully answer your question?
Yes, Mr. Blair.
Mr. Chairman, Fire Chief, thank you for coming tonight. I think these types of discussions are discussions that this council has to have. Mm-hmm. I would like it to be more frequently because I think a lot of the safety issues that you and your team are dealing with, and even what police chief and his team are dealing with, are the vital services that many of us got elected for, is talking about public safety. My questions are going to be related to knowing that what you just said, us being the busiest fire station in this region. Mm-hmm. Not too long ago, this council voted, and we placed before the voters a need for more safety equipment. So how, knowing that we've had an increase of runs, an increase of demand on our services, how is that translated to the wear and tear on equipment and safety vehicles and all the things that we had previously, just a few years ago, were asking the voters to give us more money to purchase for your department?
Well, I think a little over 3 years ago when I became chief, we started to take a look at everything we do. And we became very efficient in areas, and I'm not even talking about response areas, but just the trash service areas. And we reduced cost. Went to everywhere we could save money, we did, and we tried to make some hay where there wasn't any to be made. We've been very fortunate with the EMS billing money and working with Director Rhodes and Director Baum in replacing our medic units on a more systematic time frame where they're getting replaced now. We're doing a lot better. We also addressed our operations, the way we respond to calls, and we used to send fire engines on calls that would assist a paramedic unit, and running the numbers, they're not needed most of the time, so we stopped doing that. So it saves on maintenance costs down the road. We're doing much better on our medics. We bought a fire engine last year, which has been serving us very, very well. We do have some other capital needs. The capital needs in the fire department are millions of dollars because fire trucks are millions of dollars. A ladder truck in the north end of town right now is $900,000 to replace that apparatus. You just can't pull $900,000 out of a hat when we have a whole lot of other things going on. We need police cruisers, and there's just one pot that we all have to share. So we get really creative, and I've met with Director Baum and Director Rhodes on many occasions, and we're trying to get a plan in place. We've had vehicle replacement plans and equipment replacement plans on paper, but sometimes we can't pay for those things because they're so expensive. We struggle to move things around in order to make that happen. All in all, we do have some capital needs right now. We are working through those with the city administration. I think the open dialogue's been great. We're doing everything we can to get creative and think outside the box to make things happen. In a perfect world, these other fire departments that have brand new fire apparatus, they don't have any call volume and they have a lot higher taxes and those types of things. It's different. Newark is its own entity. So it's challenging, to say the least, and we'll work very, very hard to replace the apparatus as it needs it and increase our coverage and those types of things.
What would be the top items that you mentioned a truck for $900,000? I remember you giving a presentation and you had a whole list of items that are just are beyond where they should actually be in service. So I mean, what would be sort of what are those top items that would come to your mind?
We have addressed some of those items, like we replaced the fire engine from the downtown station. We refurbished the engine in the West End station last year for $90,000, which will buy us another handful of years. It's a good truck. It's in great shape. A refurbishment basically makes it almost like new, with an engine overhaul, transmission overhaul, some cosmetic things. We have ladder trucks are very expensive. We have our tower ladder downtown that is 24 years old now, and it is in need of a refurbishment or replacement. And our ladder in the north end is 11 or almost 12 years old, and it's in need of replacement. And it's staffed every day, the ladder at the Hollander Street Station.
What's the average time those are supposed to be used? You're giving
NFPA 1901 is a standard that the fire department uses for apparatus, and they say 10 years is outside. You shouldn't be, And it also, there's many factors into that, specifically how busy is the apparatus. A small volunteer department where an engine sits on the floor and turns 200 calls a year is going to last you a lot longer than a fire engine that's making 13 or 14 calls a day. That's just the nature of the business. Maintenance costs, we measure the maintenance costs and to what exactly it's costing to maintain that specific apparatus. And we know when it starts to tick up and up and up and it's out of service time, it becomes a problem where a conversation has to happen for replacement. But like I said, when it's never really a great conversation when, hey, by the way, I need $900,000. And that's something that even on paper looks great, but we have a lot of things going on, and I'll push heavily to get things. And I think we've had great conversation just here recently about some of those needs in the city, and we're moving forward with some ideas.
Perfect. Ms. Hall, I think there's one in the back. Go ahead. Go ahead.
One more.
Yes.
I don't know if you can address this now, and maybe this is too soon, but can you maybe talk about any plans for Station 4 reopening as a operational or?
There are no current plans to reopen Station 4, and I think I kind of hit some of that because I thought maybe Dee would ask that. I kind of hit that in the PowerPoint that we do have a reduction in call volume in that area. we're able to cover that district with the downtown fire station pretty efficiently. It's something that when we have limited people, limited resources in some cases, I'm going to put them metrically where the call volumes are. And in that case, that's the least busy call volume area of town. So would I love to have 10 fire stations and all that out across the town where you call and 30 seconds later a fire truck shows up? Of course I would. Of course I would, but we definitely don't. It's a very expensive business, the fire department. Very, very expensive business. And it's taking the most important things and prioritizing things at the time. I never want to try to prioritize something when someone's life is in jeopardy. We do our very best. And I got to tell you, I think that our fire department is second to none. The people that work here are dedicated and they're very, very good at what they do. And I spend my time around Ohio talking to other fire chiefs and seeing how they handle things. We are second to none. They're very professional and do a very, very good job, and I'm proud every day. I hear a lot from the outside fire chiefs about what's going on in Newark. They're very interested about what's going on out here. They watch us very carefully.
I guess, and maybe in the future is what I'm thinking of, because the basket sold.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will be businesses and lots of people, and we might need that fourth station eventually. And I just wondered if there was a plan, any...
I will tell you that nothing is never off the table. We reevaluate what we're doing all the time. My everyday is numbers and dealing with metrics and how can I service the people of Newark to the best of what I have to service them with. I will never tell you no. There's always a possibility that something like that happens. That's all dependent upon funding. It's all dependent upon staffing and things like that, many factors. So I won't tell you no, and I won't tell you yes. At this point, it's something that we're just measuring on a day-to-day basis.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions from the audience regarding the presentation? Yes, in the back.
Yeah, back on the subject of where you know the call is coming from, what do they call from a cell phone?
There's technology now at the Lincoln County Regional Communications Center where they can triangulate you and if you stay on the phone long enough, they'll ask you your location. But interesting you should say that, because a lot of people don't know where they are. They have no idea that I'm on 21st Street, but it can triangulate you and get you within a certain area, and they can find you. The technology is getting better every day and even getting smaller and smaller. It used to be within a few hundred yards, and now it's getting down to feet in those areas. So technology is great with cell phones.
So do they do that on the fly, on the run?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and believe it or not, the majority of 911 calls now are coming from cell phones. They're not coming from landlines. People are getting rid of their landlines. So the technology and the education factor on having your cell phone and the technology in the 911 center, they're keeping up with that.
Well, about a bazillion years ago, I worked for the telephone company, and I was involved in the first E911 system that was installed down here at the main station.
Yeah.
And of course, back then they didn't have cell phones. It was all landline. It was pretty simple.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The other question about that is Ms. Carnegie.
So in 1992, when you came on, can you talk about your manpower then with 4,500 calls versus 11 plus thousand, and how many guys you have on duty?
Our manpower is a little higher now. Overall, we currently have 79 full-time people on our books. It's difficult. We have a lot of retirements. We have people leaving to replace them. So generally we don't function at 79 every day. We're generally a little bit lower than that. The call volume has skyrocketed, and it is a conversation that I have with the city all the time. We're doing the very best we can to put boots on the ground in Newark and get people to service them. It's a measurement that we take all the time on call volume in the area. So I don't have an answer for you as far as it would cost a lot of money. We have other needs. I mean, fire trucks, $5 million for a fire truck, people, all these things. It's such an expensive business that we have to measure those things, and we talk about them all the time. The administration and the firefighters, I think we all want the same thing. It's just getting to the finish line together is difficult because so many other needs that we have. We just don't have an unlimited pot of gold to pay for those things, so it's very expensive.
How many guys, do you know how many guys were on staff at 92?
I can't remember. We had different shifts back then. We had 4 platoons, we called them back then, and we worked a 10s and 14 shift. I think in 95 or 96 we moved to a 24-hour shift. So we went from 4 down to 3. So it increased from 4 shifts to 3, increased our daily staffing. It's kind of difficult to explain that right here on the go with you, but the staffing, I don't recall exactly what the staffing was in 92 and 93 off the top of my head. But we're at 79 now. I think that within the last 10 years, the highest staffing we had was 88 at one point, and we had overtime at that time. Overtime reached $900,000 at one point. We had a contractual mandate for 19 people per day, and we almost paid $1 million in overtime to get that done. So that was a 3-year, in the last 10 years, there was a 3-year period there where we had at least 19 on a day. Currently, our minimum staffing is 16. We're hoping to go to 17.
Mr. President, Mr. Director Bob, did you have something to add to that? Or? Okay, Mr. President.
Have you given any thought to maybe a county-wide fire district, possibly hoping to combine some resources, or a Newark, Granville, one larger department?
I think consolidation is a good thing. I don't know that it's as easy as just saying, let's get that done, and it happens within a year. In some cases, when communities, especially municipalities, try to consolidate, it's years and years. It's a 10-year plan in order to get that done. There's different funding streams and things that are separate that have to come together, and voters have to have a say. So it gets very, very detailed and down into the weeds about how do we get this done. Consolidations worked a lot out west in a lot of fire departments, and that's how they're paying for things. West Licking Joint Fire District is an example of a district in our Licking County area that has several townships that they cover, including Pataskala. So that revenue, all of they contract with them. I would always be looking to how can we make the service better to the community. How would that? You'd have to show how that would benefit the taxpayers and get more trucks on the road, people on the road, and those types of things. But it's a very, very tall order, especially with these heats been around for years. Newark's been here since the fire department's been here since the 1860s. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm always looking to make things better. Any decision that we make here as leaders should be to benefit the taxpayers and what they're paying for. And if something were to better the service we're providing, I would support that.
I want to thank you for your wonderful service. You've saved our lives many times over the few years that we've lived here. I wonder, you said the fire engines are really, really expensive, but what about the other vehicles, the EMS vehicles?
Mm-hmm.
Because wouldn't that help if you didn't have to take out your fire truck on an EMS run?
Yes, the EMS vehicles are cheaper, but we have to have a response. In Newark, we're so busy that we have to have a staffed fire truck. If we put all of our resources today, all of our 16 people today on medic units to go around on runs, and we have a fire, there'd be no fire truck to respond. We don't have volunteers or anything like that. We have to staff. A city, a municipality our size has to have a fire response model where it's ready to go. Minutes matter in this business. We are in a business of minutes. People in cardiac arrest, somebody trapped in a house fire. These things do happen. Some people don't read the news and don't know, but Newark specifically is very busy. We do pull people out of house fires. Sometimes we save people. We have a gold standard for cardiac arrest save rate with the American Heart Association. We're very proud of the work that we do. Medic units are $180,000 a piece. Fire trucks are obviously $500,000 and more. So we have to be able to take care of what's going on. With 1,500 fire calls a year, we have quite a few working fires, probably in the 65 range last year. Those are very, very high, dangerous runs that we need to get there and mitigate the incident quickly. So, and a lot of the EMS calls, as you saw, we were only transporting 59% of the EMS calls. Some of those are just assisting people. It's not really a medical need at that point. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, well, the second part of the question, though, is wouldn't it be good to have more people?
Always.
We'll just ask for it,
It's all. I think anybody would tell you more people is better. It's just a matter of measuring our budget and how we can get things done. So believe me, the administration, we talk about it all the time, and we all have, like I said before, we all have the same common goals. It's just how do we get there?
Right. Well, we ask?
I don't want you that way either.
Director Bob?
Chief, do you have some illness and injury at the fire department right now?
We do.
Okay. Are you actively recruiting?
Yes.
Okay. Have there been technological advances since you hired on that act as force multipliers to help you more effectively treat people?
Yes.
Quicker?
Yes.
Chief, thank you for your service.
You're welcome, Director.
Mr. Lang?
So living in and representing the area of town that has by far the longest response time, I have to ask, what can we do in the short term to improve response times in our area of the city?
Well,
I'd say short and long term.
in the last few end-of-year reports, you'll note, if you want to go back and look at years past, we've had strategic plans in there and needs and wants kind of thing of what our plans are moving forward. And we've talked about increasing our presence in those communities, in those parts of town, those neighborhoods in town that have higher response areas. So it's always something that's a big move. That's something that the city, the mayor and his staff and myself would look at always to try to increase that. Now, you increase your presence in a community, you're going to have to increase some other things, and it does cost money. But like anything else, it's juggling all of the needs and trying to figure out which ones are most appropriate at the time. So when we see response call volume and response times in the area of that part of town, it's something that needs addressed that we're going to sit down and talk about. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate the fire department and the tremendous work that firefighters do, both in terms of EMS and firefighting, and very much support more than adequate funding for the fire department. I wonder, and the website probably tells this, but I haven't looked there. So I ask you, what is the total budget for the fire department for a year, or 1 year, or can you say that?
Last year's budget was about $8.8 million in 2017. I think we're about $9.1 million here in 2018.
Thank you.
And that's, I think we get a 90-10 business model, so 90% salaries, 10% operations.
Mr. Blake?
Turn you back around.
That's okay. That's all right. I didn't expect to be standing here this long, but that's all right.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's an important conversation, and we rarely have these opportunities, so thank you for being here. My question is related to going back to being the highest, or sort of you're doing the number of runs in the Central Ohio area, the fire department is. How are we retaining, or what challenges, opportunities are there in retaining people to stay with us versus saying, look, I'm going to go to a department that's not as busy and make a higher salary and have less work to do? So what's the challenges and opportunities that you've experienced since you've been chief to maintain that?
Well, we have had some issues retaining our employees. Usually with somebody within their first 2 or 3 years, we were hiring them and they're leaving to go to other fire departments that do pay more. It should be noted that Newark has what's called a 24-48 with a Kelly Day schedule, so it's a 48-hour work week. Which keeps the pay a little bit lower than some of the departments that they may go to make more money. They're working 56 hours a week because firefighters can work 56 hours a week on that schedule. Newark has a lot to offer. No one that has left Newark has said they didn't like working here. It was all a financial decision to be made at that time. It is something we're struggling with right now. It's another one of the 15 topics that the director and I are scratching our heads on and trying to fix. We are discussing it. It's not falling on deaf ears at the moment. I'm doing everything I can to make it better. I'd like to hire people and retain them forever. They can retire here. I think we're struggling to be there at the moment. And it is concerning. We continue to hire people, and when people leave and you can't just hire somebody the next day. So in some occupations, some jobs you just interview. Hey, Monday we're going to have some interviews, and Thursday I'm going to make a decision, and Friday they start, the following Monday. It takes 2 months, 3 months at best to get somebody processed through the process to become a public safety worker because of you have to have certain trainings, and you have to have background checks, psychological exams, voice stress analysis. So I mean, before you even take the first run. It takes a lot of time, so we fall short on staffing in some cases to keep them.
Do you see that there's like, just remind me, just because I don't remember again, but what's our starting package, salary package compared to who we're competing against? I mean, I can't remember what a starting firefighter makes.
The starting firefighter in our contract, I think, is at $34,000. $34,000 a year. The last 6 people that left are starting it in the 50s, at wherever they're going as probationary pay. So usually it's a $15,000 to $20,000 difference, and that's why they go. We have everything to offer here as a fire department, but that's exit interviews show that's what we're looking at.
Thank you.
Any final questions regarding the presentation? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief. And you've said a lot of kind things about our people, and I don't mean to do this to discredit anything you said, but the 79 that we have today, that's not what records indicate. The roster I have in front of me says 75, and that includes you and the deputy chief. Take you out, that's down to 72, and we have 2 people leaving next month, which takes us down to 70. So I guess part of my question is, am I wrong, or are we at 79, or are we at 75?
Our authorization schedule by the SAFER grant is 79. We are currently down because we haven't replaced the people that have left, and that's where you're showing the discrepancy in the numbers. As we try to process these people, March 12th, we'll be swearing 3 firefighters in on March 12th. We hope to staff the following 2 or 3 as soon as we can get them through the process, in a month or 2 after that, and get us back up to that 79 number as soon as we can. So that's why you're showing lesser numbers, because we don't have them right now. Once they leave, it takes 2-3 months in order to replace them, and we hope to get back up to that number of 79. But as you well know, that in that meantime, we could have a few people retire. We have several retirements potentially this year, and some others that we're trying to forecast to replace. So the goal is...
I apologize, maybe I misunderstood. I just want to make sure it's clear that we don't currently have 79.
We have authorization strength of 79, and the administration has... We're trying to hire as fast as we can, and it's just not fast. There's nothing fast about it.
And if I may, somebody answered Dennis' question. When I got hired in 1988, we were at 70. I was number 69. 70, we got hired, we were at 70. And said as of next month we'll be at 71, 30 years later.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Rath.
Chief, when you're going through the process of hiring on new firefighters, what's the most common disqualifier that you come across?
We've got 2 different disqualifiers. A lot of times, believe it or not, we get BCI, FBI background checks, see if anybody's had any criminal background history, and then we have a voice stress analysis, which is this day and age's lie detector test. It's called a voice stress analysis, and we've lost a few candidates through that. One way or another, whatever came back, it came back not employable at the time. So there are some candidates. We also require everybody have your training in order to be hired here. So you already have to have your firefighter 1, firefighter 2, and your paramedic certification to be hired. In years past, we just hired people off the street and sent you to training. In this case, it would probably take 2 years to really fully educate somebody and get them to where they need to be as a full member of the fire department, operating as a firefighter, professional firefighter, paramedic. And as you know, we're doing 85 to 90% calls EMS. I need paramedics on the street. So there's all kinds of disqualifiers, I guess. It just depends. We need somebody that's going to service our community, well.
As they're leaving here and going other places, I got to believe that if the other places were doing the training first, they'd probably go there first. So for us not to train them, for us to have them certified and licensed to come here, I believe that's fairly common?
Yeah. In this region, I think it's pretty common to have a firefighter have their training and be in a paramedic school before they get a job. A lot of places, because of cost-saving measures, it's very expensive. If we hired somebody and sent them to paramedic school, it's 14 months of training. That means they're gone when they're on shift or off shift. It's overtime paid. They can't function as a paramedic until they get their certification at the end of that 14 months. So it becomes even a staffing issue. We need so many paramedics on duty a day, but they're not a paramedic yet. So we hire all paramedics.
So in a situation where maybe we do decide to pay for somebody's training, is it possible that we hold them contractually to work for us for X number of years as a payback for?
I don't believe that's possible.
Okay.
I don't think we could ever enforce that.
You know what I mean? It's, businesses all the time send kids to school and say, we'll pay for 4 years tuition, but you owe us 5 years when you get out.
Right.
I didn't know if that was possible or not.
There is some discussion right now regarding whether or not when somebody, it takes about $5,000 to get somebody on their first run. So if they leave in 4 months, we've got $5,000 into them in 4 months of work. And in some cases, they cash out some of their accrued time that they have accrued while they're those 4 months they're here, and we pay them to leave. So we're trying to figure out a plan to recuperate some of those costs. Other fire departments are already doing that in order to try to save some of that money that we're losing by these vast amount of people that are currently leaving us. So that's something we're working through with the union and the administration, trying to figure out how to fix that problem.
Mr. Blake.
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that when we hire a firefighter, paramedic, for $34,000 a year, which is about 15, 20 less than other areas, and they're coming here with already their certifications and things, do we work with any particular educational institution to sort of have a pipeline of potential recruits, or do we have any relationships with, I guess I'm asking more of your recruitment process of how we're getting the people into the process of getting interviewed and all that stuff.
We are kind of fortunate in Newark because we have a rider program here. So we get riders, fire students from Hocking. We get COTC grant paramedic education. These paramedic students will ride with us. We get quite a few. Almost every single day we have somebody that's doing training in the medic with our 2 paramedic units, and a lot of times they'll come in and observe, and we recruit that way. A lot of times, hey, do you want to come work here? And some people have come back to work here that loved their riding experience here. We attend job fairs when we can at CTEC and COTC and sometimes Denison or wherever to try to attract some candidates. We're not getting a whole lot of response back out of that. Across the state of Ohio, it's not just Newark that's struggling to find people to hire. I have the assistant chief in Euclid, for instance, and Euclid is a rubber stamp of Newark as far as population, call volume, those types of things. They don't have people either. They're struggling to recruit people as well. This generation, it's almost a generational thing that we're struggling to get the people we need to do the fire service. The younger people in our community are opting not to do public safety at this point. So the Ohio Fire Chiefs and others, we're trying to come up with ideas of how do we increase that, the ability to hire these people. But as far as recruiting are concerned, we reach out on as much as we possibly can. We put how do you get hired as a firefighter on our website and word of mouth. But generally our call volume here is attractive to young people, but they don't stay because at the end of the day it's pay.
Any final questions for Chief Connor regarding the presentation?
I told you it wouldn't be more than 5 minutes, so.
That was a solid 5 minutes.
That was a solid 5 minutes. You're very welcome.
Chief Connor, thank you for being here this evening. I appreciate it. Thank you for your service. If you could pass along this council's appreciation for what you do every day, I would appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the Safety Committee meeting.